Watsi hopa stahanga temish. Patu shino metapup. Kaita amo tawa hawet te hawen shkatsem. Shkaw shkayu temish. Shkayish temish. Shkapapa shkanana temish. Kot onatsi atyashi shkauchan. Shkaita tawa hawet si troa yashta. Hopa. Kai maikwe. Zatsna amo kai. Tsi shaimna tsi sawakchan. Tsi shawakchan. Kai to me yona tsi to hiatsin chayash si emi ek anachtish si kai hawe tsi kaustif kai watrani tsatsi natsi it ekaitas it ekaita titano tsi to hima si sna wakchana shusi to na to watsi kanashiani etu kai tawa eto masko tsi sa ya trutse na kers aan temis o me yona tsi kroostia krajetsis tsi netrast krotroma hema sta stawas naitrago an kana tsi sna wakchana shusi amusti sna yatrana shus emeto tsi me yona yuna matsanish krus hopa shona trajet hopa tsi hoye tsi katsi tek skusat et ane Amom ashautran is near. Ja, neist jetzt ayutsi, stin aitranish emetsi. Hausina, uitan sina ni otash kortuma. An yetsi hauna metawas naitra kunish. To hiats insi, no anach kunish si. Shana istirsi, ni wanach si manish si hiatsin. Taatsi kustano timis taatsi sho shaeni kutsi sho emetsi eshaitsku sho na trajet sho pa me yon to taatsi himas exsi hai ho yemsi kuma ka tunitsi na shama shano kutspetsi nia hima he anetsi nyuk chana shus ame anetsi eme naitraku eni wotrash kotruma taas ano timsi tawa ekai shaiwa namati eme Thomas Kotsi sai atrutse show hopa eme to me yon tais Kotsi si nai atrutse hopa himas efra ne zahatitsi aus kayut kaidrani zahatitsi eps si kaidrani anetsi host Kotsi jet frus hopa taatsi sanutimish tawatsi shaini Kotsi. Good afternoon, everyone, my people. It's good to be able to offer you a brief message today. I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but we've been very busy. It's been very challenging the last couple of months with a number of things related to the pandemic. But I want to share some information with you today that I hope will help all of us have a better understanding about where we are at in this pandemic, what we have been able to do through the last 7 months to respond to the pandemic and all of the implications that it presents to all of us. And so I want to take some time, and I'm grateful that you also are taking the time to watch the video, and hopefully you'll again have a better understanding. It's so hard in this time that we can't communicate directly with you, but we're using the technology that we have available to us so that we can keep you as informed as we can. And I appreciate that a lot of our other tribal programs, the schools, the Department of Education, the Health and Human Services Department, and others have also been using technology to keep you informed of what's happening within their respective departments. So thank you for being involved and staying informed through those mechanisms for information. And I will continue to use these throughout the rest of this year. As you know, and you've probably heard, in the last couple of days, New Mexico has seen some great spikes in the number of positive COVID cases statewide. And even in Cibola County, the cases have rose again. And here at Acoma, we unfortunately have had additional positive cases, totaling to date a total of 51 cases that we've had since the onset of this pandemic. So considering the time that we've been involved in this pandemic, 51 is a lot of people, but it's also not as a great a number that it is exhausting the resources. So it's through everyone's participation and everyone's cooperation that we've been able to maintain very low numbers. We do have a bit of a spike currently with 10 positive cases in the community. And we were hoping that we would not see a time where we had more than 10 people at one time. But this is our situation currently, and many families are in quarantine. Many families are in isolation. And we need to all pray for these individuals that they have a full recovery from the COVID virus. It's very contagious, as you know. You hear it on the news, you see it on social media. It's all around us, and this virus isn't picky. It spreads easily from one person to the next with person-to-person contact, especially. And so that's why we're advised to follow the stay-at-home orders. We're advised to keep social distancing. We're advised to wear masks and take other precautions. And so I'm really grateful to all of you for doing these things, because it is keeping our numbers low. Today in New Mexico, it's been reported that there were 819 cases today in the state. That's the highest number that the state has seen since COVID came into the state in March. So this is an indicator. This week's number has been an indicator to all of us that we need to respond again to ensure that the numbers in our respective communities don't go up. We're seeing a lot of spikes in jail and prison settings. But we're also seeing a lot of spikes as a result of some of the businesses that have opened, including restaurants and bars, and also other public indoor facilities. So we all need to continue to be very careful as we're going out for essentials, as we are maybe engaging in meetings and other activities that require us to go off the reservation, medical appointments. It's very important that we continue to practice all of the precautions, especially now that there is such a high number of cases in our state. We have to be vigilant, and we have to remember that all of us have made some really big sacrifices over the course of the last 7 months. We've been restricted to going off the reservation. We've not been able to see our families. Some of our family members haven't been able to come onto the reservation. It's been tough. These are big sacrifices that each and every one of us are making, not only here at Acoma, but throughout the world. And I will say that our tribal communities across the nation are all making these similar sacrifices. It isn't only us, because we have a lot at stake. Our culture, our way of life is compromised because of the virus, because it can impact, the health and wellness of our elders, of our cultural leaders, and of each of us who have a responsibility to ensure that our culture as Acoma people continues into the future. So making these small sacrifices during this time will help us to ensure that Acoma will continue. We will survive, our culture will continue. We will have more generations of Acoma people to come. And it means that we have to make these sacrifices and change our way of doing things for a while. I suppose that, as we get ready to go into the new year and the years ahead, it's going to take a while for us to gain back some normalcy in our lives. But it will happen. It will happen. We have to be optimistic and be very concentrated in our prayers and just in our daily lives, so that our survival today ensures the survival of the future of not only Acoma people, but all of humanity. I hope that we will find balance in the way in which we're living, where we cannot take things for granted. We're seeing that now. And, we realize that now that we've probably taken some things for granted, like family, like our relationships with one another, having free access to our home at Old Acoma, our ability to practice our culture. So, it's very critical that we also change our ways of thinking about things and responding and just living life. We can't be wasteful of our water. We can't afford to damage our natural resources, our air, our lands. We all have to be better stewards of our resources, the gifts of our Creator that have been given to us and that we have a responsibility to take care of. So I ask for your continued cooperation and your patience as we move forward in this pandemic. There is some new information. Information comes to us every single day, and it changes every single day. When we think we might know as much as we should or need to know about the virus, the next day new information is presented to us. So we have to change as we move along. We have to adapt as we gain more data and information from agencies like the Centers for Disease Control, the Department of Health, the Indian Health Services. All of these factors play into the decision-making that happens not only here at the tribe, but nationwide. But there is some new information regarding a vaccine. The federal government has an initiative right now to make sure that the vaccines are available even as early as this winter, but in limited numbers and for use by healthcare providers. And we're hopeful that the projections for a general distribution of the vaccine will be available in the early part of next year. So we all need to be optimistic that the vaccine is safe and that it becomes available to all of us, because it's the vaccine that is so critical to a virus of this type. So let's all be optimistic about those developments and hope that, in the coming year, we will all have a better sense of when this medicine, this vaccine, is going to be available to the general public. I really, as I said, my administration and the council, we are appreciative of all of you for adhering to the executive order. Yesterday, we sent out a notice of an amendment to the executive order, and I hope that all of you have received a copy of it. If you have not, please call the tribal offices, and we will direct you to where you can obtain a copy of the Executive Order Amendment number 1. And in the amendment, there are some things that have changed. You all probably noticed that the travel center, the Sky City Travel Center, has now opened. They're operating at 75% capacity. The Skyway Travel Center at exit 117 has also opened, and they are operating at 50% capacity. And also McDonald's and Subway are also scheduled to open. They might even be open now, I'm not sure. But the tribal council gave authorization for them to open. So that's a good sign for us that we can, open some of our businesses, but we have policies in place to ensure that both customers and our employees are safe and that they have plans in place to respond to any exposure of the virus, in those places of business. Our Health Command Center plays a critical role in ensuring that all of these policies, safety policies that have been developed, are followed, and that the staff are aware of how to respond in the event of an emergency. So the council has allowed those particular businesses to open, but as you know, our other businesses remain closed, including the casino, the hotel, the restaurant. The businesses that we own in Albuquerque, they are also in operation based on the state guidelines, which have changed as of yesterday because of the spikes in positive cases, but they remain open as well. You also know that there has been we had changed, the tribal council had authorized the change based on the state provisions for gatherings no more than 10 people. Well, as of yesterday, because of the spikes, it changed again to 5. So we are following, and we will maintain the gatherings of no more than 5 people unless a particular household has more than 5 family members who reside in that residence. Of course, that's the only exception. But we hope that with numbers come down in the coming weeks, we will be able to reintroduce and increase the number from 5 to 10. That doesn't mean that we can have all these social gatherings, because that's also still limited. But we want to make some considerations for families and some of our programs who host group meetings and things like that, so that we can accommodate those types of activities. I want to also just share that in the new in the amendment, it addresses the issue of picking piñons. So the executive order does authorize this for the rest of the remainder of this month, but we again encourage that people take all the precautions, that you're safe while you're out in the open range, and this weekend especially, because we also have hunting that is happening throughout the backcountry. So you have to be extra cautious this weekend because there are a number of hunters who are also out there. So please dress appropriately and wear clothing where you can be easily identified. Stay close to the roadways and not venture in far off the roads. And please, everyone, please don't litter. Like I said earlier, we need to be better stewards of our land. We don't do a great job all the time at keeping our land clean. Many of the Tzat and other people who have been out in the backcountry report back to us how it is so littered right now. Piñon pickers, wood haulers, and hunters and cattle operators, everyone, we have to be better at packing up our trash and bringing it back and disposing of it properly when we get back home, not just throw it out in the open range. We have cattle, we have wildlife out there, and think of our land. If we say we really care for our Mother Earth, well, we don't want her to look, to have trash scattered about. So please make sure that you're not littering while you're making these trips out into the backcountry. Also, the executive order amendment it includes additional guidelines for safe practices, including quarantine. And again, we just ask that we all respect those families and individuals who are quarantined, respect their privacy, and their need just to be alone during those days that they have to be secluded in their homes. We tried our health command center and the food pantry and our health and human services department all work together to ensure that they are supplied with food and other supplies. But it's very important that we respect that these people and individuals and community and family members are in quarantine and that they need that time to heal. This goes for individuals who might test positive, but it also goes for some of us who have had to quarantine, like myself and my administration. We've had to quarantine a number of times because of testing or because of secondary exposure to a positive case. And so, we, in order to protect our loved ones and our family members and other employees who work with us, we have to go into quarantine on occasion when those situations arise. So we ask that we, are all very mindful that the quarantine period is a very difficult time for families. Let's respect them and let's offer them support and pray for them, again, that they are going to be well. The provisions of the amendment also call for, again, as in the original executive order, that if some of us don't follow the rules, if some of us violate the provisions of the executive order, there are consequences. And that goes for each and every one of us. None of us are exempt from that. That includes every tribal member, that includes tribal officials, tribal councilmen, that includes cultural leaders, that includes our employees, people who serve on our tribal committees and boards. All of us have to and should be adhering to the executive order. There's no room for violation. I mean, if we violate, we then we bear the costs of having to go through court, and none of us have that time or money to have to go through those processes. So please adhere to the executive order and avoid having to deal with any confrontations with law enforcement and the courts. We don't wish that upon any of you, but on occasion sometimes we have a tribal member or tribal members who violate the executive order, and by violating the executive order, they place so many other people in danger, their own family members, their own loved ones, but the community at large as well. Many of our students have returned back to school, and I know that it's been very tough. A lot of the students experienced virtual learning at the close of the last school year, and starting this new school year, the Grant Cibola County Schools, our own Agu Community Academy, the Agu Learning Center, and other schools, Santa Fe Indian School, St. Joseph School, all have been working very hard to ensure that they were prepared and would be best prepared for the introduction of students to virtual learning. Well, we all know that there have been all sorts of challenges. Most of those challenges related to access to the internet. And unfortunately, worldwide and certainly statewide, not only Native American communities, but small rural communities have the challenge of not having access to broadband or internet. And that's a challenge for us as well. But I think that the school district and our Department of Education have been working very hard to ensure that each student and every family have what they need in terms of the technology, whether it be the Chromebook or a laptop or a jetpack, whatever you need. Our students need to attend school virtually. That's the priority. And a lot of money has gone into purchasing this technology. A lot of money has gone into setting up hotspots and other access points to the internet. But we also realize that even with all of these upgrades or introductions of ways to access, that it's not enough. It isn't sufficient for many of us, many of our families. And we realize this is a challenge. And I wish our broadband projects, which were initiated last year after several years of planning by other tribal administrations, and I'm glad they had the foresight to get the funding and plans in place so that we can have broadband, so that our entire reservation can have access to the internet, to the web, World Wide Web. And we're getting there. We finished the first phase of the installation of the lines, and the second phase is currently active, and we hope that if all goes well, we will make some of our first connections in parts of the reservation active into households as early as summer of next year. So please keep informed of that. I'm sure the next tribal administration next year will be working very hard to ensure that those projects come to life and that the broadband does serve its purpose. It's a multi-million-dollar investment made by the tribe and other funding sources to ensure that Acoma reservation-wide has improved broadband. We're able to see the improvements at our school across the street at the Pueblo Community Academy and within some of our tribal offices. So that's a start, but we have a lot more work to do. And I just ask for your patience and let you know that after this phase 2, we will be in a much better situation that sets us up for access to the internet over the long term. Yet last night, the Department of Education held another community forum, and the focus of this forum was around the Grant-Cibola County Schools and this Board of Education at Cibola County, who approved the introduction of the hybrid model of instruction at Grant schools from grades kindergarten through 6th grade. And as of yesterday, we learned that there are district-wide, there were only 35 students who registered and 2 from Acoma. So clearly it's after a lot of surveys that were administered by Grant-Cibola County Schools, it was clear that many families here at Acoma and Laguna and other, the neighboring Spanish communities and the city of Grants, it's the desire of many of the families and parents to maintain the virtual learning for now because it's just still unsafe for their students and their children to have to get on a bus and take the daily risk of contracting COVID, either on the bus ride to school, the bus ride home, or in the classroom. But Cibola County Schools, and as well as our Pueblo Community Academy and the Learning Center, have also been working hard to ensure that we are preparing for the re-entry of students at the appropriate time. Right now is just not that time. But Grant-Cibola County Schools is moving forward, and they, of course, are going to be monitoring carefully the instruction and the health and welfare of the students while they are in the classroom. So if you are thinking about sending your students back to school, please make sure you understand all of the provisions and the safety guidelines that are set forth by Grant-Cibola County Schools. Ask questions, contact our Department of Education. You all probably know Leslie Vallo and Joni Sanchez, who work directly with our families. Roseanne Pasquale is the liaison from the Grant-Cibola County Schools. These are individuals that you can contact to find out detailed information about this re-entry, this hybrid re-entry, and also to know more about what's in store for our students through the remainder of this first quarter of the school year. So I just want to encourage parents and students to please use the technology for its intended purpose only. We've already had reports of misuse, of damage of equipment. These cost a lot of money. They're not cheap. And so anytime, a child breaks or misuses their equipment, well, it sets them back in their own learning. So please, parents and grandparents and guardians, remind your children and grandchildren to take care of the equipment that they have, to use it in the right way and for school purpose only. We've had even parents who have been misusing the technology, doing online shopping, accessing sites that are inappropriate. So we should know better than this, and we're able to monitor the use of the jetpacks, so we know, or the Department of Education monitors, and so they know what sites are being accessed by some families who are misusing the equipment and the access to the internet. So please be very careful and be respectful of this equipment and the fact that it's being provided for the purpose of educating our children during this time of remote learning. One of the other things that I want to share with the community is that, as I mentioned in, I think, one of my last videos, that the federal government, as you know, did approve the appropriation of funding called the CARES Act, that is relief funding that was provided to states and cities, other entities, including tribes throughout the country. And it took a while for that funding to actually come to the tribes. And it was a lot of work to actually develop the budgets, develop the proposals and the requests that we had to send to the federal government and the various agencies, including the Indian Health Services, the BIA, the Department of Treasury, Department of Education, Health and Human Services. That CARES Act funding was very widespread across a number of agencies. And so our executive directors and our Acoma Business Board and Acoma Business Enterprises executive management team all have been worked very hard to ensure that we would obtain a good amount of funding to help us get through this pandemic. Now, as you know, the federal government just doesn't give money away. They have very strict guidelines for how this money is to be used. And unfortunately, they set a very short time frame for the use of this money, which expires on December 31st. And so every entity who received some CARES Act money has to spend all of the money by December 31st. And this was very challenging because of the ways in which you can spend the money based on the federal guidelines. It just made it very complicated. But I am grateful that we were able to secure some money. We had requested a very large amount of money from the CARES Act bill. Native American tribes throughout the country asked for a lot more money than we actually received. So it was unfortunate that we were unable to secure more money to support the response to COVID-19, but we did receive some, and Acoma did receive a total of $10.6 million of various CARES Act funds. It didn't just come in one lump sum. There was one large sum that came to the tribe, but there are other groupings of money that came to the tribe from different agencies like the Indian Health Services, the BIA, Health and Human Services, and Education. And so that funding, we're able to spend that funding based on the budgets that we submitted to each of these funding agencies, including the Department of Treasury. And we had to, our finance team really had to understand and study the guidelines for spending this money so that, we're spending the way it was intended to be spent for the needs of communities and the needs of tribal businesses, who many of the businesses, including ours, that have been closed. And so because our businesses are closed, there's no revenue generation. We're not making any money. And so that puts us in a very, very difficult situation when we have many financial obligations that we need to meet, not only on the tribal government and operations side, but also within our businesses. It takes a lot of money, and those of you who attend general meetings will know that we have budgets for both the ABE enterprises and also the tribal government operations. And it's in the millions of dollars that it takes to operate programs and businesses. So one of the other components of what the federal government provided is these what's called PPP loans. Basically, they're forgivable loans that the federal government has made available to businesses throughout the country, including tribal businesses. So we were also able to submit a proposal for a loan, a PPP loan, and we're able to secure a little bit of money that would help our Acoma business enterprises with their expenses as well, including salaries. So it's been quite a job on the part of our executive directors and our finance department to ensure that the money is being spent in a timely fashion based on the budgets that we submitted and were approved by the tribal council and were approved by the federal agencies, all of those that I mentioned earlier. We also have to report, of course. The federal government just doesn't give money, and they expect us to report back on how we're spending this money, how we use the money, how was it used to address the COVID, specifically the response to COVID. And so these reports have to be generated. We have to show that we use the money for specifically to address the needs that we have here at Acoma. And so I want to just highlight some of those for you. As you know, many of you probably have relatives or you yourself work for ABE or you work for the Pueblo. You have continued to be paid even this time, during this time when we've been closed. So a lot of this funding has also gone towards salaries. And that's one of the big areas that for many tribes and cities and the state and federal agencies, they've used CARES Act funding to continue to pay their employees. And we've done the same here. So all of our tribal employees and all of ABE employees have continued to be paid over the course of this 6+ month period. And that's a large number. That's a large dollar amount when you think about the number of employees that we have, hundreds of employees that we are taking care of, families who are still able to pay their bills, who are able to put food on the table. These individuals continue to be paid. In other places, in some cities, in some tribes, they've had to lay off employees, maybe because their CARES amount wasn't as much as they had hoped to receive, or other circumstances. They vary from one tribe to the next. But here at Acoma, we have really taken a careful look at how the $16.7 million of funding that has come to Acoma can benefit and be stretched as far as we can within the guidelines in response to the pandemic. And so I just want to share some figures with you. To date, as of October 15th, we have expended about $10.4 million of this CARES Act money. And there is a remainder left. A lot of that funding has also been earmarked already for other services. And one of our biggest expenses is food for the food pantry. That's one of our largest weekly expenses. And so, but it's been important for us to make sure that we provide food to the community because we have these stay-at-home orders in place and because we have restrictions for going on and off the reservation. And so the food pantry is a big expense for us. And but I'm grateful that we're able to provide the food, and we have the CARES Act funding, and also donations from the private sector who have contributed vegetables and meat and other supplies to the community. So, we're going back to salaries. Only on the tribal side alone, we've expended close to $3.5 million of payments in terms of paychecks, salaries for our employees based on our budget. So I'm really grateful that we're able to do that, because a lot of other communities have had to lay off their employees. But this will last through the end of this year. We'll only have this money available to us through the end of this year, and then from that point on, the tribal council will have to evaluate where we are financially, to see if we do need to make some adjustments in our employee base. If we're in a financial position to continue to pay all of our employees. But we're also hoping that probably after the election, the Congress will consider a new relief bill, and we're hopeful that there will be additional funds that come to the tribe that are more flexible, that we can actually use it for other things and other needs that we have, not only as a tribal government and our businesses, but within the community, because we recognize that there are other needs within the community that we haven't even addressed yet. So we're hoping that the new federal relief bill will include enough money to accommodate some of these other needs that we know that the community will have in the coming year, and maybe even into 2022, depending on how effective the vaccine is in combating the virus. One other area where we've invested some of the CARES Act funding that was approved by the federal government was on infrastructure, and that's almost $3 million to address our infrastructure, and that means our water and wastewater systems reservation-wide, because one of the things that's really critical to combating the virus is having clean water. Having water, period, and being able to dispose of wastewater. So we've had to also then invest money in those areas as well, and also provide for some of those families who didn't have access to water. I'm grateful that here on Acoma, it's only a few families that we've had to assist in this area. If you heard the news about, big land bases like the Navajo Nation, they have had to spend a lot of money on the same type of infrastructure need, and they're probably not going to get to everyone because of the way they're so rural over such a large land base. But we were able to help and improve our systems here so that all families have access to water. And that's been a big price tag as part of the CARES Act funding. The ABE was also supported by tribal CARES Act funding in the amount of almost $2.3 million, but they also received another $2.9 million through the PPP loan program. So they were able to sustain the payments to employees, even though they've been shut down for so long without any revenue generation. But this federal money has been able to help them. Now, what's the situation we're going to be in now with our business enterprises is, because we remain closed, there might have to be changes there. Unfortunately, we might have to consider a layoff of some people because there just is no access to funding. But we're doing everything that we can to try and avoid that. But just like any other tribe and business and city government and city entity, sometimes those hard decisions have to be made. But again, we are the business board and the executive management of ABE and the tribal council continue to look at all the options that are available to us. And at the end of the day, it's going to be some tough business decisions that will have to be made. We also have are investing a lot of money in other community assistance efforts. Some of you may have applied for and received the artist and small business grant that was available. There was a total of almost $1.2 million that went to tribal community members, both living on the reservation and off the reservation, to help them. A lot of them were potters and artists whose only income is generated by art sales. But we also had some small business owners who were able to benefit from this program. And we hope, I was just in a meeting today with another private foundation who is looking at ways to support tribes who have established these types of grant programs. And we're hoping that we can engage the private sector in helping us to maintain these support programs for our Acoma families and other Native American artist families throughout the country. As I said, there are also other expenses that have that we've incurred as a result of COVID, and we've set aside money to pay for COVID testing kits, paying for the COVID tests that get processed at research labs. These are very, very expensive. And we're fortunate that we've been able to access the test kits, but it's very, very costly. And so we have a large amount of money set aside to pay for those test kits so that we can continue to do curbside testing for our community members. And especially when we have families and individuals who have been exposed to the virus, testing is always very, very critical. We also, through our Health and Human Services Department, have allocated a large amount of money, and they've actually applied for other funding and have brought in other financial resources to support the work of our Health and Human Services Department. And it's very, very wide ranged, because they're the ones who are dealing with the families and the individuals. They are the ones who coordinate testing. They are the ones who are also coordinating a lot of the education and outreach. Plus, they are also dealing with the day-to-day social and behavioral health needs of our community. So they require a significant amount of funding. They've hired additional staff to address these issues. And of course, who would have known that we would have needed people to do this type of work? But in a situation of a pandemic, it is necessary to have the capacity in the form of employees to do all of this work. Our Health Command Center is also another vital part of all of this, and the 3 co-commanders of the Health Command and their membership, which is comprised of other directors and coordinators of our programs, all work hard to assess the daily. Again, like I said, we get information every single day, and so they have to respond every day to this new information, and so they also are entrusted to act on behalf of the tribe to ensure that the public health of our community is being addressed from a surveillance and treatment to quarantine, law enforcement, EMS, and other health-related issues. They deal with all of that and work 24 hours practically to ensure that these situations are being addressed because it's always an emergency. Not every situation is the same. They vary from one individual to the next because we all have our own health issues. We all have our own situation, family settings, and so not one case is different from the next. And from the very first cases that we had in April to now, you would think that we would have a solid plan in place for addressing a COVID situation. Well, we do. There are policies that guide that work, but every situation is different. And so it requires having that access to the Health Command Center and the representatives to come together then, even if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, to come together and make decisions based on the information that's available. And sometimes we have to engage the Department of Health for the state of New Mexico. We have to contact the Centers for Disease Control. It takes the coordination of many people to arrive at decisions relative to positive cases. So, there are some other community assistance initiatives that we are close to launching, including a winter fuel assistance program, access to firewood. There will continue to be hazard pay available to essential employees. And we're also, again, looking at the Health Command because the Health Command Center, they're the first ones to get information. And so they need resources as well. And so we're also looking at ways, after the CARES Act runs out, how do we sustain operations like the command center, like the food pantry, like testing? All of those things are going to have to be supported somehow because COVID will still likely be around. So we have to be prepared for that. And, a lot of that planning is also happening at this point to be as best prepared in the coming year. And the Tribal Council really will be guiding a lot of that. Once a new tribal administration comes in, they'll have to inform them and give them direction on how to proceed with this response to COVID in 2021. And then, of course, food and other supplies continue to be purchased, but we're also grateful for the millions of dollars of private funding that has supported food and supplies that have come to our Pueblo. So I ask all of us to be grateful for these contributions. So when you get food, sometimes it's paid for by the CARES Act, sometimes it's been donated. So, give thanks and appreciation for what's being provided to you in the form of food or cleaning supplies or other services. Those come at a price tag, and so we're committed to continue to providing those to all of the community. One of the things that I want to stress is that it's flu season. Flu season adds to the dangers of COVID. So I ask all of us, all of you, to make sure that you get your flu shot. Please get your flu shot. It will protect you. And I know that some of us might have health conditions that prevent us from maybe getting a flu shot. So please talk to your doctors. Ask them about what you should be doing or what you can consider as an alternative, or ask if it's safe to get a flu shot. But the flu season will add to this. The experts say, and the data shows that flu season could create this additional spike, a second wave of the coronavirus. And that's not what we want to see. So if we have the vaccination, the flu vaccination, that will really help us to help eliminate any spikes in the number of COVID cases or complications in general from contracting the flu. COVID testing is also important, and as you know, and I thank all of you, I'm glad when I see those long lines by community members, either at ACL or when we have them here. I'm glad that you're going to get tested. It's just good practice in this time to test regularly. So I thank you for doing just that. So my people, it's been almost an hour that I've been talking, and I've shared some information with you. There's a lot every day that we are dealing with, but we feel good that we're able to provide for the community. We're grateful that the federal government has offered some support. We're grateful that the state government has also stepped forward with support. We're grateful to the nonprofit community, the private sector, including our own tribal members, those of you who have donated from your crops, the corn and vegetables and melons, everything that you've offered to the food pantry, sewing face masks for our community, coming out to volunteer when we have food deliveries, offering money, offering your prayers. Thank you. All of that combined helps us to beat and address this situation. And it doesn't surprise me that we do it, because that's part of our culture. We care for each other. We love each other. We respect one another. We give when we can. We share. Those core values are so essential in a time like this. And it will get us through this difficult time. And I hope that our children who are watching us, who are seeing us follow rules, who are seeing us be impatient, who are observing us, being giving, being supportive, showing our love towards one another, that those values that we're all expressing, that they, through witnessing us doing it, will carry it on in their own lives into the future. That will be that will sustain us. That will sustain our core values. That will sustain that concept of uts itu kai yun So with that, my people, I extend blessings. I extend my love and care to all of you. Know that you are in our daily prayers. And please know that my brothers on the tribal administration and I, the field chiefs, I just spoke with the head field chief this afternoon. all extend our blessings to you. We love and care for all of you, and we will do all that we can over the course of the next 2.5 months left in our terms to address the situation of COVID so that you're safe, that all of us are safe in the days ahead. Ta'as Anutemish. Bahawen the seat through Ostia, Bahawetsi na true ashkits. Gai Shaiwana Mati, Emetsi, Kuutito, Gaitsi Shitrana, Zitawa Tranitat. Ma Meshaiwana Mati. Nake Kutru Ostia, Meun, Hawetsi, De Ektrus, De Quekrus, Bashutsi, Kaom Anya. Bashkai Amo Aihatsi. Be careful, be extra careful, especially now that numbers are high. Gaime etsi. No yutsi bashutsi ta kutrus bashun itrana kutrus. Kume yon emetsi tramitsi traya shutsan a traya minata tawen a tsatsem shkaw shkayu timish shkayish timish amu bashamitsi trua shutsan a zi tramitsi hawet yuzi truaw ayana na yat nishtia kata pachko hawen a zi Nawa ai tsatsem gaime e ba hawet yuzi truaw ayana zi hawek Ktra e temistika e ktra yu temistika e hawet yuzi truaw ayanat. Da as anu temisi ni ostia ktra truma da hopa amus shrayat si eko tsashka makaina si notmo amum atsi sautran isniatsi ya kashum haus nazi stutsi kaina haus si shrayata ni kuninata. Da pars ek me yona anetsi da stiar kamastiu shapum anetsi ijak stianish ba etze hawenetsi traywa yutsi stray trash hopa da as anu tim skais ek sikanatsi eko Zi neimi na shot mako notmutsi still namatsi anetsi sna wakchana shus zi hawenam zi anetsi kanatsi himatsi sna wakchana shus zi amursi sna yatrana shus da as ahanu temsi hopa tru oishat zi kutru ostia haweti ektrus hopa amu shotuma. So thank you everyone for your attention, and just one more thing before I forget. Let's all get out there to vote. I'm grateful for all of you who came out, who registered to vote. Let's make a difference in this election. We have an opportunity to help make a change here in this time. So please come out to vote and be careful when you go out to vote. So with that, thank you. Have a good night, good day, and know that you all are in our prayers. Bye-bye.